Our pets can't tell us if they're sick or they're too hot. So during summer months, it's important we responsibly care for them.
Dr. Stuart Dalton from the White Bear Lake Animal Hospital is here to talk to us about that and give us some tips. Welcome to the show,
Thanks
Dr.
for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Pleased to be here.
So some things we think about for our pets, but some things we don't. One thing that you often see during summer months, so I see as a police officer getting called for, is pets in cars.
Right. Always something to be concerned about. A lot of people ask if there's a specific temperature that they should focus on where it's safe below but not safe above. My concern about giving somebody a specific number is they get hung up on that number, and it's much more complicated than that. You know, depending on the relative humidity of the day and also depending on like the breed of the dog. Certain breeds of dogs are going to be much more sensitive to the overheating effects of being in the trap car. I think a lot of people appreciate the fact that cars can heat up well over 100 degrees very quickly. So I think people need to basically use common sense. If there's any concern that it's too hot, it's much better, it's much safer to leave the dog at home. And if you've got anything that's maybe more susceptible, the brachycephalic breeds, which are the short-faced breeds, things like bulldogs, pugs, dogs like that don't have as efficient a breathing system through their nasal passages, are going to be more prone to overheating. Arctic breeds, huskies, malamutes, and their crosses tend to be much less heat tolerant. I've seen cold acclimated huskies that overheat just from coming indoors. So you can imagine taking them and putting them in a hot car could be very serious. So it's a real risk, and it's a risk that's just not worth taking.
So what are some maybe the signs that a dog or some other pet may be dehydrated?
Dehydration, you might notice that they're not drooling as much. One of the best ways to check dogs for dehydration is to check their gum. So pull the lip, touch their lips. Dogs in general should be pretty slimy. It should be quite a bit of saliva there. If your finger is sticking to the gum, there's a potential that that dog could be dehydrated. With cats, you can also check by doing a skin tent where you pull the skin over their shoulders. In a young, otherwise or average age healthy cat, you should be able to pull up their skin, and that skin should snap back right away. In an older animal, that's not quite always the case, but what we see with dehydration in cats, along with the sticky gums, is that skin tent will be slow to return to normal.
So what about situations, say you have a dog or a pet that you think has been out in the sun for too long, and maybe they're starting to throw up? What are some things you can do
so things to look for concerns that your animal might be potentially working towards or suffering from heat stroke. As you mentioned, Ron, vomiting, diarrhea, they may be hypersalivating, they may be salivating excessively, they may be panting excessively in an attempt to rid themselves of some of the heat. They may be ataxic or trembling or wobbly. They can even lose consciousness and go into seizures, and it's potentially life-threatening, so it's a very serious condition.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, if you suspect that's happening, obviously the first thing you need to do is get the animal into the shade, get them out of the direct sun, and then you can start to cool them. You need to be very careful. You don't want to cool them abruptly. You don't want to dump ice water on them. Cooling them too rapidly can cause very serious life-threatening complications. So basically hose water or lake water to start cooling them, and then call your vet immediately, or if they're not available, making sure that you have a number for an emergency clinic, because very often those animals need fairly aggressive emergency care to help them recover fully. So. And
you answered my question about cooling them off too quickly. You don't want to do that.
You don't. There are very serious complications that can occur with their body's ability to clot. There's a condition called disseminated intervascular coagulopathy, or DIC, that can be brought on by over rapidly cooling. They run the gamut of throwing clots to different parts of the body to not being able to clot properly, and it's really serious. And once an animal's suffering from that, it just makes everything harder. So gradual cooling.
Now, I know for humans, we need to wear our sunscreen. I know I've got my sunscreen on today, but for animals that are out in the sun, is there any worry about them getting skin cancer?
They can. They don't really suffer from the same sort of skin cancers that people do. Most of the skin cancers I'm not a physician, but most of them are melanomas associated with pigment in skin and things like that. Dogs can, and cats and animals can get cancer associated with UV exposure. The one we most commonly see are called squamous cell carcinomas. So yes, exposed and especially unpigmented skin has the potential for developing cancers that can be serious. So that you can consider using sunblock on pets. You've got to be a little bit careful. Most commonly, people are thinking about applying it on the nose area and things like that, and that's really easy for dogs especially to lick. And a lot of sunscreens have a lot of zinc and zinc oxide in them, and that can be significantly toxic to dogs, so you have to be careful about that. So as much as anything, maybe limiting direct sun exposure is useful. Sunscreen in limited cases would be helpful.
And another thing, out on nice warm days, I see a lot of people jogging by us on the park here, and there's a little path up there that's made of asphalt. Gets a little warm. What can we do for
when you're jogging and you've got your running shoes on, you don't notice how hot that pavement can get, whether it's asphalt or concrete. And in the heat of the day, pets can very easily experience 1st or 2nd degree burns on their feet to the point of blistering. So the two options for managing that would be either to avoid that time of day. So you run in with your dog or walk your dog in the cool hours in the morning or in the evening after the sun's gone down and the pavement's had a chance to cool off. Or you can try to teach your dog to accept booties, the same booties they wear in the winter to protect from cold. You can use in the summer too to protect from heat. Not every dog's going to go for that, but it's something that's definitely worth trying if it's something you want to, if you need that level of protection.
I see some people that run on the asphalt and then their dog is running on the grass. It seems to...
Certainly a great option too, sure. Yep.
Okay. I wanted to ask about fleas and ticks and what, what should people be doing in the summer months and year-round for that matter? Yeah,
fleas and ticks certainly are primarily a warm weather issue. In this part of the country, fleas can potentially be a problem year-round. There are good preventatives that people can use. Most of the newer generation products are topical products we call spot-ons, where it's a small amount of liquid that's placed between the shoulder blades. The drugs then soak into the skin, sometimes into the bloodstream, depending on the product, and they can be very helpful in helping control flea populations and minimizing how long ticks spend on the dog. Some claim to have repelling properties as well. So using products like that are very helpful. The other aspect of ticks are the infectious diseases that they can bring along. Lyme disease is the one that most people are probably familiar with that come from the deer tick. Unfortunately, the deer ticks are becoming more and more of a suburban problem. It's not just up north or just in Wisconsin and places like that. The deer ticks really are finding their way into backyards. So there's a very good vaccination for Lyme disease that if dog owners have not addressed that issue, it's worth having a conversation with their veterinarian about that. I'm a big proponent of the Lyme vaccine. I think it's a good vaccine. I think it tends to be very well tolerated. And I treated 2 dogs for Lyme disease last week. I mean, it's definitely around. It's not a rare occurrence. So
how long does that vaccine last then?
Typically it's 2 shots the first year, 2 to 4 weeks apart, and then it's an annual booster every year after that.
So a good idea. Some easy prevention.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any other thoughts or anything that we might have missed related to
well, as long as we're talking about vaccines, I think it's important that people keep in mind that routine vaccinations are very important. There's a distemper combination for dogs and a distemper combination for cats, different diseases. Rabies is important for all dogs and cats. We firmly believe that, both to protect the pet as well as to protect the public. And then there's the optional vaccines, like for the dogs, the Lyme vaccine. For cats, if they spend much time at all outside, discussing the feline leukemia vaccine with your veterinarian is important. So again, there's optional things. Heartworm testing, both for dogs and cats that spend time outside, is very important. Heartworm is a mosquito-transmitted disease. It's endemic to Minnesota, which means it's here to stay. We're never going to get rid of it. There's enough infected dogs out there that act as an active source for the disease for the female mosquitoes to transmit to uninfected dogs. So testing dogs annually to make sure they don't have the disease, as well as putting them on preventatives once a month, is important. And that's important for cats too. Cats can get heartworm disease, the same disease dogs can. And unfortunately, we don't have an effective treatment for cats. So if your cat's outside for any length of time and has significant mosquito exposure, you really should discuss heartworm prevention with your vet about that too.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of great information. Thanks for being on the show.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.